Well, first of all, I want to thank Para for providing this opportunity for me. I have fond memories of the last time I was in Sao Paulo giving a presentation, and it was under different circumstance. Today, I have the pleasure, and I really mean it, it's a pleasure, to speak about managers and partners integrating in different cultures. And this presentation is going to be about my experiences that I had the opportunity to visit many countries, to work with many different people and many different cultures. So this presentation, once again, is sharing those experiences and hopefully providing some insights for those global fleet managers that will be visiting other countries. So let's begin. Of course, this is a slide about me, and I do not want to spend a lot of time on it because most of you who know me is I'm a very humble person, and these accomplishments that I'm going to be sharing with you could not have been done without working with tremendous folks, tremendous colleagues, tremendous stakeholders, and tremendous people that I have met throughout my journey as a global fleet manager. But for now, let's touch on it briefly. I am the co-founder of JC Global Fleet Consulting. The last time you saw me, I worked for Mondelēz International. On March 31st of this year was my last day of a 36-year career with Mondelēz Craft. I had 36 years of providing service to the consumer that enjoys our Mondelēz products, to the cross-functional groups that I worked with, and to the external stakeholders that I had the pleasure of working with. It's been one heck of a ride, and 36 years went by fast. So now it's for a new chapter with JC Global Fleet Consulting. Just a little bit about me, and this is something I'm very proud of. I'm the winner of the 2019 European Safety Fleet Manager of the Year Award. I have the distinct pleasure to be the first American fleet manager to win a prize at the Fleet Europe Awards. And in addition to being the winner of the 2019 European Safety Fleet Manager, I also was the 2009 runner-up for the Global Fleet Manager of the Year. Prior to 2019, I also have the distinguished pleasure to be named the 2017 Automotive Fleet Manager of the Year here in the U.S., and something that I'm very proud of. I was the AFLA president from 2013 to 2014. I got involved in a lot of industry association work, and that to me is a way of giving back. But as you can see from this slide, as I shared earlier, those who know me know that I'm a very humble person. I look at some of the main events that I participated in. I can think of three that I am the most proud of, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Let's start with number one, the picture in the upper right-hand corner. I know if you look at this picture, you'll recognize many people. And these are the leaders of the Brazil market and fleet management. This goes back to my days at NAFA. I believe this was in Austin, Texas, where I had the pleasure to have dinner with this group and really get a chance to know them. And that's what started our journey. And to me, that is a beginning of a great relationship I still want to maintain as I move forward in this next chapter of my life. And having this opportunity to speak in front of you has allowed me to do that. The picture in the lower right-hand bottom is me giving providing a day-long session to my Polish colleagues in Warsaw, Poland. As many as you know, with a name like Dmochowsky, I have a Polish heritage. My grandmother immigrated to the U.S. in 1912 and from Poland to Pennsylvania. My grandfather was a coal miner, and my mom and my dad were common people that worked labor jobs. My father was a butcher. My mother cleaned homes for a living. And I was so proud to be in front of my Polish colleagues that day and be able to train them on fleet management was a distinct honor I will always forget. Never forget. And last, a personal contribution. You might recognize that lady in the middle. Her name is Cairo. She's the procurement lead for Mondelēz in Brazil. This was taken at the Global Fleet Conference, where I had the privilege to have my team on stage talking about our global strategic strategy. I might be a little biased, but I think it was one of the best presentations at the Global Fleet Conference in June in Miami. But all the presentations were good. But I was so proud to be with a fleet manager, Diego from Mexico City, Cairo, a procurement manager from Brazil, David, a fleet manager from the UK, Vin, the fleet manager for North America, and Mirai, the global procurement colleague that I had the privilege to work with. We'll talk a little bit about the cross-functional groups later, but for now I wanted to really show this slide to you because it's about the people. It's not just the total cost of ownership, although that's important. People what makes it happen. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for those memories, and I look forward to many more. Before we get into the discussion of the different cultures and the stakeholder group, I want to present this slide to you. This is a slide on the governance team. In order for a global fleet management strategy to be successful, the number one ingredient is a governance team. Let's look at the governance team, and I'll be reading from the left to the right, starting from the top. Of course, you have to have a vice president or above level in the HR community to be on your governance team. This person, which will help you when working with work consuls over in Europe and other human resource issues that come up with a company vehicle. From HR, you have to have a VP or higher finance person. We have to do everything we can to continue to reduce our costs. The finance team is the team that monitors all activity, not just fleet, very carefully. So having a relationships with the VP Finance is critical. In addition to the finance leader on the team, you have to have an executive leader that will own the package, if I may call it, the global package for company vehicles. It's required to have a leader who is an executive VP who reports to the CEO. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, reports to the CEO. That indicates that that leader will have the not just the power, but the authority to manage this group of professionals that covers many cross-functional groups. Below that owner is what you call the operational owner, which is me, the global fleet manager. The global fleet manager owns the operation of the entire package. Moving on to the right, of course, procurement, a VP level or above in procurement, that will be very instrumental when working with contracts, also KPIs, and also the relationship with the external stakeholder, whether that external stakeholder is an OEM, whether it's a fleet management company, a third-party safety management company, a telematics company. The procurement has a seat at the table for those conversations, and it is critical to maintain a positive relationship with this group. They can be very resourceful and helpful with the journey of being a global fleet or having a global fleet strategy. And last, at the senior level, is a health, safety, and environmental leader. We will touch on zero emissions later on in the presentation, but this is a critical component of the team. And then from there, you can see the regional players, which would be the procurement manager for that region, fleet manager for that region, the health safety engineer for that region, and the region sales director, which represents all your drivers in the sales community. Now, let me talk about those regions for now, and I don't have them listed, but I will have them listed later on a few slides. The first one is the EMEA, Africa, Middle East, Africa, Middle East, Asia is one region. North America is the second. Latin America is the third. And last but not least is Europe. Why implementing a governance team? I'd like to touch on very briefly. The governance team defines the long-term strategy, policy, and they lead by example to achieve best-in-class leadership. They also take ownership for the results as team. They resolve challenges and mitigate risk. Some of the challenges will be if the fleet management company that is our global provider is not in that geographical area, then we would have to have an exception of having another fleet management company support our fleet. This, in order to go away from the global fleet supplier, an exception needs to be requested, and it needs to be approved by the governance team. I talked about policy briefly, but the governance team will handle exceptions so it doesn't drag on. And they also lead and support field operation deployment. The governance team is so critical to provide that support because it's not done with one individual. They review dashboards and, again, operational KPIs. And the part that I enjoyed the most is they identify and they share best practices and celebrate successes around within the regions. By sharing best practices, your key to success will be achieved. And the key here is not just one individual runs the show. It's a governance team. So let's move on. I like to talk about the fleet market's differences on a higher level, on a global level. Now, there are many, but these are the ones that I feel would help this group in identifying the differences. Let's start with operational environment. You know, you can go to a region. One region could be open-end leasing, as it is here in the United States, or it's closed-end leasing in Europe. the global fleet manager is required to be familiar with the types of leasing, the operational differences when it comes to leasing. And the good news here, folks, is that you have a governance team. Remember that finance VP that can help you with that as well. Another operational environment that I like to point out is in Mexico. They handle accidents differently in Mexico. They handle the incidents and the claim right at the scene of the accident. With the operating environment, with accident management, you need to connect with those folks who have insurance within the corporation. If the region is insured, it's an insured region. The majority of our vehicles, or the majority of the vehicles could be self-insured, but some countries they could have insurance, and that is embedded into the operating lease. So accident management is key to know the differences. In Mexico, like I said, you get in an accident. The claim specialist for your company and the claim specialist for the person you hit are at the scene, and timing is of importance. So that's something one should keep in mind in the accident management arena. The next is customs. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on customs because the customs can vary, but one thing I would like to share about customs, I've noticed in my travel that we have more similarities with people than we have differences. Now the customs that I'll touch on is basically vacation. One of you might say, well, what does vacation have to do with it? Well, taking a vacation in Europe, if you're from Italy, you pretty much shut down the month of August. You're gone. And I agree with that approach. Coming from North America, where I might have a tendency to check my iPhone and see how things are going. Well, in Europe, vacations, they're vacations. So you can't plan anything really important that requires all the cross-functional groups being together in a certain geography. And Europe is something that I found that you have to be cautious of. Next is, if I might touch on religion. There are different customs in religion. All I'm saying here is be aware of them in case your travels require you to attend a region, because you want all those players that I listed in that governance chart to be in attendance when you visit that office. So it's important to keep track of the religion holidays and be respectful of it as well and have an open mind about it. I learned a lot when I went to Singapore about the Muslim community, and it really helped me grow as a person. The next area I like worldwide is culture. Culture, there are many different communication styles. Be familiar, like when you go to Poland, everybody is pretty stoic, quiet, reserved, but they really want to get the job done. So they might not show a lot of emotions, but they're really focused on detailed questions. Interpersonal styles, I found this in Asia, where if you go to attend a meeting and the interpersonal style is very reserved, people bow instead of shaking hands. People don't come on strong with their tone of voice. Their interpersonal style makes sure that they're here to get the job done. They want to be respectful of your time, and there are no small talk. It's get directly to the business element. And the last culture piece I'd like to touch on is governance. Some regions will use the governance team as a directory of guiding principles. They follow those principles, and they do the best they can to stay in line with what the objectives are and how to deliver cost savings. Whereas in other certain cultures, like if I used Mexico, they know that their world is different. Their fleet segments has a lot of manual touch points. They will do what they need to do to align with the global governance strategy, but you have to anticipate some exceptions because of the local market conditions really indicate that there is another way of doing business, and the local way of doing business versus the global way of doing business is the one preferred. But keep in mind here, the global strategy is to have a continuous improvement mindset, and the local strategy will deliver that. Keep in mind that the global strategy is also wants continuous improvement, as I shared, financials being obtained, in other words, reducing costs, reducing your financial spend. As long as that does those two things, then it's okay to go local versus global. And last but not least, and this is the one I find myself constantly doing, is keeping update with the legislations. It's critical to follow the trends of what's happening with the legislation community in those countries. For example, in Europe, they've introduced a CO2 emission performance standard for new and passenger cars and vans for 2025 and 2030. That's what you're working on. You're working on your long-term strategy. So it's imperative to be in line with the regulations, especially as they pertains to CO2 emissions. The next, what I like to do here is just take North America and South America and combine those two and touch a little bit about some of the operational environment differences as well as custom, culture, and legislation in that region. Let's start again with Mexico, because I enjoy going to Mexico, as well as Brazil. I enjoy going to Brazil. They have a manual auditing process in Mexico. So they operate like the way I operated when I was running a fleet early on in my career. The auditing required a full-time person as well as a manual process. I introduced to them an automated process which looks at the variance of spend comparing one month to the next in each category. And what I did there is I had the opportunity to share best practices on how we did it, and they incorporated some of that process. But keep in mind, the auditing piece was a very strong operating environment segment. And I know the auditing definitely delivers savings, especially when there's a rate is wrong, or an allowance on a vehicle is not the discount that was agreed upon within the agreement. The auditing helps. Security, they got the best telematics system within the regions that I traveled, and I traveled all the regions. They have the best security as well as the best telematics. And the nice thing about their telematics is they can share best practices with us when we implemented that within the other regions. Customs, Canada. Let's touch Canada. You know, today's Canada's Thanksgiving. I saw that on my iPhone today. And Canada is a very proud nation, but it's very similar to the U.S. And they have PERC vehicles in that region, whereas in the U.S. we don't have that many PERC vehicles. So the Canadian folks, the culture there, they're very proud of their heritage, but they also want to keep what they have. And PERC vehicles, to me, is a form of compensation, and to them as well, but it's also deliver many benefits. So it's very custom to have a very focus in Canada on PERC vehicles. The culture in Brazil, I'd be remiss if I didn't share one of my favorite countries, Brazil, is the largest fleet market in South America. So the culture there is everybody is engaged with fleet that I notice. But they also, similar to Mexico, have a local strategy versus global strategy approach. And they do align with our global strategy, but there's an opportunity to maybe to change it a bit, provided that the change would provide reduced cost in running the fleet, and as well as a continuous improvement mindset. Because when you're a large fleet, you're going to get some really good lease rates. You're going to get some good prices on your fees for services. But in the biggest opportunity is the continuous improvement arena. And there is reducing accidents, which will definitely help in that division of reducing costs. Last but not least is the legislation changes. In the U.S., we have the new Green Deal taking place. It hasn't taken place yet, but it's an election year. Who knows what's going to happen? But to stay current with the legislation around the Green New Deal is important, because our world can change in a matter of a month. Our world, as you know, with this pandemic has changed. We're here Zoom. So be ready for any legislation, not just in the U.S., but for others in the North America and South America countries. All right. What I'd like to do now is to focus on the differences that I've noticed in, I'll call it the EMEA region, Africa, Middle East, and Asia. Operating environment in Asia, there was numerous meetings. Technology, they wanted technology training and small talk avoidance. They really don't need small talk. Small talk is not part of the agenda, and it takes a little while to get used to that. Me, who is the U.S. citizen coming in there, I enjoy conversation about what's happening in the world. There, they don't have time for it. Japanese custom is their two main concerns for the client, as being a client, is the client relationship they have and the operational excellence. They insist on making sure that the relationship takes place, but it doesn't happen overnight. A relationship takes time. You might not get it at the first meeting in Japan. When I went to Japan, it took several meetings to just get an agreement on an operational practice. And it was a process that we wanted to implement, auditing invoices, but they really dug in deep to the process. So that kind of goes back to their technology training, wanting to know, but also they want a good relationship, which will take time. So be patient. It might take a year or so, or in order to achieve that. The culture, one thing you have to avoid is the Western syndrome, which is you walk in, you expose your big plan, and then you walk out and you leave that local team to do all the work. Ladies and gentlemen, that will not work. It will not work in EMEA, and it will not work in South America or Europe. It's a process. And the other thing in EMEA is there's a chart there, which is the CO2 emissions per capita for 2017. And as you can see, In EMEA, Australia is red. So a lot of legislation is going to be focused around clean air, CO2 emissions, as well as it's in the United States. Stay current with that. Cross-functional team, I'm not going to read this chart because it's a long-winded chart, but I want to kind of go to the next slide and get a little bit more wrapped around the differences. The first difference is the procurement people. When you talk to procurement people, focus your conversation as often as possible on the KPIs. Here, the total number of vehicles, car eligible employee, the number of vehicles in the global contract, the vehicle safety training compliance rate, the percent of at-fault accidents, and here the percent who adopted a personal use deduction. This is critical. And the other, as we go to finance, you got to be able to have your numbers, and they have to be solid numbers, and you have to avoid any conversation that is shared with finance people that results in you not achieving a planned target. What they're asking for is solutions. So you show where you're at year to date, you show the target, and then you provide solutions as how you're going to get to the target. Human resources, they'll work with you with work consoles. They can be a great resource in helping you with work consoles. Region sales president, you want to talk about something for the driver, and that here is an app, like a safety driver's app that has gamification. You want to make sure that conversation is around the driver when you talk to region. Legal department, I don't have to tell you this, they're very critical. So anytime you make any policy changes, you need to incorporate them. Insurance department, it's all a matter about self-insured versus fully insured. And I don't have a lot to say about it, but you do currently have a lot of self-insured fleets in the industry that might be moving to a self-insured. I've heard of certain fleets that have begun that, not 100% going to fully insured, but something to stay on top of. When you talk to your risk and safety people, it's all about options on the vehicle. Make sure they're aware of all the safety options that you have. And your tax department, you're going to need reporting from them. They're going to ask you to provide reporting. You need to really sit down with the tax department and bring in your third-party fleet management company that's providing that information. So it's in a format that you want. Other ones, real briefly, is transport companies during restructuring. Make sure internally you're aware of any changes that are taking place that pertains to headcount reduction. It is critical. When you talk to the OEMs, we all love our OEMs, third-party companies. The OEMs are excellent strategic partners. Utilize their skills when you're setting up your fleet strategy. Telematics, so much to talk about telematics. So many good things that are happening in this arena of the environment that the telematics works in. It is critical to stay current, and when you're talking with your telematics group, make sure your safety folks are part of that, as well as they're part of the safety training modules that you are going to be bringing in. But the key here to these slides, we are different in many ways, but how of our differences can make us stronger. So listen, carefully listen when you're in these meetings. Final three thoughts. The road to a global fleet strategy is very challenging. A growing number of multinational companies see this as the fastest way to get to where they want to go. And it is up to you, to us, to pave the way of the organization to take full advantage of this opportunity. If anyone would like to get a hold of me, they can reach me by typing Dmochowsky, JOHN @gmail.com. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, Brazil, Latin America will always have a special place with me.